Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Susan Coffin for Attitude Magazine. Our guest today is Beth Main. She is going to speak on the topic of how to stay on time and on task when you have attention deficit disorder. Beth is an ADHD coach. She's been working for many years helping people develop systems and strategies and skills to overcome ADHD. Like many of us, she was diagnosed after her son was diagnosed with ADHD in second grade. She recognized herself in all the symptoms, and she's got some great tips for us today. She writes frequently for Attitude Magazine, and her website, which I would urge you all to consult, is ADHDsolutions.net. With that, I'll turn it over to Beth to give an introduction, and then we'll start the Q&A. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Susan. I'm really happy to be with you today. So staying on task, it starts with deciding what you're going to do, being intentional with how you're spending your time. You can't make good choices about what you're going to do if you don't know what your choices are. So what you need is a good task management system or a to-do list that has everything on it, everything you've ever committed to doing. Trying to keep stuff in your head is distracting. It takes up mental bandwidth that would be better used on other things. And what happens is you forget stuff, and you remember something you needed to do when you're in the middle of doing something else. So you stop what you're doing, and you jump up to do the new thing, and then you think of something else and jump up to do that, and you never get back to the original thing. That's how it is with ADD, right? We're impulsive. Our natural tendency is to go do whatever catches our attention. Planning is the answer to that. So, of course, having a list is of no use if you never refer to it. The same thing with your calendar. So you want to get into the habit of planning your days. Take a look at your master list every morning. That's the one that I just mentioned that has everything on it. And choose the things that you intend to do that day. Think of your master list like a buffet table. You're not going to eat everything on the buffet in one day, just like you're not going to do everything on your list in one day. You're just filling up your plate. This is where you get to prioritize. Figure out what is your single most important task and put that on your plate, your to-do list. Then move on to your next most important task and put that on the plate too, and so on. So I don't really have time to get into a lot of detail about this, but the point is know what your choices are and then pick the important stuff and do that first. That way you can be confident that you're working on the right thing and there are no surprises, or at least there are fewer surprises. So getting stuff done means you have to say no to other things. You don't have to do everything yourself, and you certainly don't have to do it all today. Delegating is an important ADD management strategy. You want to spend most of your time working on things you're good at. Look at your master list and delegate the things that you're not so good at. You can also defer some stuff. Go through your list again and see what you can put off. It isn't procrastination if you're deferring something because it's not a priority. Some stuff doesn't really need to be done at all. You want to make peace with that and admit that you're not going to do it. Drop that from your list. So delegating, deferring, and dropping will free up time and mental energy to focus on the things that matter most that you want to do. So, okay, now you know what needs to be done first. You've committed to actually doing it. It's time to get started. But wait, you have ADD. There's going to be procrastination. Knowing what's causing your procrastination will help you know how to deal with it. So there are two basic reasons we procrastinate: disorganization or disinterest. Disorganization basically means you don't have complete clarity on what needs to be done. Maybe you've selected a task, but what is your very first action step? Break the task down into the tiniest pieces. If you don't know where to start, what is it that you're not clear about? Getting answers might be your first step. Disinterest basically means you don't feel like it. You have to find a way to care about the task in the moment. Why is it important to you? What happens if you don't do it now? Think this through so that you know the answers, and then give yourself some sort of a visual reminder and put it in your line of sight. A lot of times we know why something is important, but we forget about it when we need that information. You might also want to try external motivation, which is basically rewards and consequences. So even with the best time management, things are going to get in your way. There are things we all do that chew up enormous amounts of time and energy. Internet surfing, having email and Facebook open all the time, message notifications, perfectionism, trying to make everyone happy, junk food, being tired. These are what I call time and energy thieves. The first step in conquering them is being aware of them, because we're usually not. We just wonder where the day went, right? Once you're aware of the things that tend to zap your time, you can take steps to stop them. Turn off the phone. Close Facebook. You know what to do. So unfortunately, you can't plan ahead for everything. You have ADD, so you're going to get distracted. Mindfulness is the solution. Being aware of what you're doing in the present moment. Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? It sounds like a simple question, but a lot of times we don't realize it when we're off task. We just go with what grabs our attention. So ask yourself every so often, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now? If not, either ignore the distraction or put it on your to-do list and get back to work. Timers and sticky notes are really good tools for this. My last strategy is probably the most important of all. You can't get stuff done if you just can't focus. You can't focus if you're tired, had a lousy dinner the night before, or skipped breakfast, and you don't exercise. You have to feed your brain. Remember that ADHD is a neurobiological disorder, so anything that you can do to improve your overall brain health is going to help. This includes sleep, diet, and exercise. Sleep, diet, and exercise are absolutely essential for ADHD management. That's pretty much it. Be intentional with how you're going to spend your time, avoid distractions, and practice excellent self-care. There's a lot to that, though. This is what I do for a living. I coach people on how to be intentional with their time, how to avoid distractions, how to practice excellent self-care. But I hope I've given you some useful information.
Great introduction. I think you hit on something when you said the question is how to do these things. I think
Right. It sounds so easy.
Our readers saying, I know I'm supposed to do X or Y, but the question of how to do that is always so tricky. Let me ask a couple of questions, pass on to you a couple of questions here that I think will maybe give you a chance to give some tips for how to get these things done. Here's a person who says, how does one deal with tasks not finished in a given time? I tend to rush into the next task, which demands attention, and then as a result, I have a couple of unfinished tasks which keep staring at me. Another person said something similar. I have more to the point of I have lots of unfinished tasks.
Oh yeah.
So
that's
any
life with
thoughts
ADD.
on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that happens primarily because we're impulsive. We're drawn to what interests us. So when a task is starting to wind down, we're starting to get bored with it, we are antsy to move on to the next thing, and we just move on to it. So a couple of things come to my mind is one, mindfulness, being mindful of the fact that you haven't quite wrapped up the previous task. A good task management system is really helpful if you're thinking about what all do I have to do, getting into the habit of thinking, okay, have I finished what I was working on before I move on to something else, and really increasing your awareness of when you're starting something and leaving something unfinished. And if you decide to leave something unfinished because, you just can't take it anymore, keeping it on your list and referring back to that list regularly so that you don't forget all about it is helpful. Trying to consciously put a limit on the number of active projects you have. Like I currently have 2 art projects going on in my house at the same time, and I really struggled with the second one because I tried really hard to not start things and leave things unfinished. But just being aware of how much you have going on and choosing to limit it.
There's a follow-up question from Terry. Similarly, when I'm faced with an overwhelming array of priority tasks, the need to drop it all and do something else is overwhelming. How do you figure out which project with our brains are constantly focusing on the one that isn't getting done?
That's a really good question, too. I come back to having a good task management system where you know what all of your choices are. If you try to keep this stuff in your head, it's just a disaster because it's overwhelming. It's too much to manage. We can't compare things if we can't see them. We tend to be very visual, and we need things laid out in front of us. And so I personally like a to-do list that has drag and drop sorting, so I can say, okay, number 1 or number 2. Okay, this is number 2. Okay, number 2 or number 3. And I can literally slide things around and make choices before I act on them. It takes a lot less time to plan out what you're going to do than to start on something and decide that wasn't quite the right thing that you wanted to be doing. Does that make sense?
Can you recommend some to-do list software that you think works for you or for others of your clients?
Yeah, my absolute favorite is Google Tasks. I get a little nervous that the data's out there, but I like it because it interfaces with the calendar. It has drag and drops. I can assign a due date, and the due date shows up on my calendar. And the drag and drop thing is just so important to be able to make A to B choices, binary choices, if you will. And it also has phone apps. It has apps for iPhone and Android.
Wow, sounds perfect.
Yeah, and I actually want to add to my answer, if I can. I don't know that I addressed the part of the problem, which is how do you know which is more important? People tend to want to prioritize based on the feeling of urgency. Oh, somebody's nagging me about this. It means it's urgent. I need to get it done. But maybe it's not that important. So knowing the difference between urgent, which is simply time sensitive, and important, which means it's carrying you closer to your goals, is critical. And when you're doing your prioritizing, you've got to choose some tasks that are important but not necessarily urgent. So you might, like for example, I'm working on a new website project. Not urgent because I don't have a due date. I'm not letting anybody down. But it's important, so I want to make sure I make at least some project or progress on it every week.
That's something that's certainly helped me over the years, is to try to ask myself each day, not what do I want to do or what's the most important thing on my plate, or if there's a really long-term goal like your website goal, to make sure I do something to move that forward every day amidst all the other less important tasks. I don't know if that is a strategy.
No, absolutely. Otherwise, your dreams remain dreams because you never make any progress on them. You've got to find some way.
Have to give some priority to those things. A number of people talk about, and this is so common in ADDers, how it seems to take them so long to do things. This is Francine. Everything takes me so long. And I mean, people who can actually go to the store, get in, get out, do what they do. It just seems, people seem to get mired down. Do you have any thoughts for that?
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts. Sometimes it's an organization issue. It takes us a long time to do things if we're looking for the data or we're looking for the tools or we can't find the paper or we don't know where to start. That's another big one. Not being clear on what the path is from start to completion. Or perfectionism is something that gets in the way a lot of times. Feeling like you have to do things to the nth degree. Like if you're writing a report and somebody else can crank out the same report in half an hour, but it takes you 6 hours. Maybe you're wordsmithing. Maybe you're doing research ad nauseum. Maybe you're trying to find the exact perfect, catchy introduction, and that takes you 3 hours. Maybe you can figure out what is good enough and just go with that. So really, things taking too long can be a lot of different reasons. It could be distractions. Maybe you think you're working, but you're not really working, because you're distracted on other things that aren't really related to getting the thing done. I think that covers it.
There are lots of questions that have come in about this issue of your to-do list in Google Tasks and sort of follow-up questions. And people are asking some things like, do you make one to-do with both business and personal? Do you separate them? Do you the software where you can prioritize this tasks into professional, social, short-term, daily, and how do you handle those multiple to-do lists?
Okay, multiple to-do list. There was a whole bunch of questions in there, so forgive me if I don't answer.
Even
most of them. But
all sorts of little questions around the actual implementation of the priority setting task list.
Yeah, I'm actually glad to see that because this whole task management system is very dear to my heart. I think it's central to getting organized when you've got ADD. So I'm going to tackle the business versus personal lists first. Should you have two separate lists? And I would say that is going to depend on how compartmentalized your life is. I am a fan of working during work hours and being with my family and doing personal things during my family and personal time, like evenings, weekends, holidays. And so I think it's very important to have my business list separate because I don't want to think about personal things when I'm at work. And I don't want to think about work stuff when I'm with my family. So it only makes sense for me to have two separate lists. Now, some people like to commingle. They like to be able to work on personal stuff during the day and take work home with them at night. I think it's bad practice, but some people like to operate that way. And for them, it would make sense to have one list where you're commingling the two. Now, that said, I do sometimes throw personal things on my business list if there's a phone call I have to make during business hours, and obviously I'm going to put it on my work list. So maybe you could think about it in terms of where are you going to be when you're working on these things. So if I'm at work, then that's when I need to call to order the firewood, and so I'm going to put that on my daytime task list. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So sort of thinking about it as location based.
Yeah.
I guess there's a question of, how do you set the priorities? People said, how do you know which is the higher priority item?
Oh, gotcha.
There's a couple of comments here, too. People say, someone commented, Michael, that David Allen's Getting Things Done is useful, but
Yes.
it may be too complex for ADDers because you could spend all day long, he says, managing your David Allen Getting Things Done system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he's also noting that tagging to-dos by context where you do it can be a helpful way to look at your to-do list.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of David Allen and Getting Things Done. I use a lot of his theories in my work and my personal time management, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, that whole keeping one master list. That's a David Allen concept.
Right. Doesn't he have a huge master list and then you make a sub-list on a given day for what you're going to do that day? Is that a David Allen principle? Yeah.
Probably, maybe not. I'm actually not sure about that. But I think it's important for somebody with ADD, and here's why. We can make a big to-do list, and it's going to overwhelm you and shut you down. That's the number one argument that I get about to-do lists. So I can't make to-do lists because they overwhelm me and I don't get anything done. So if you have the master to-do list and then you have a separate today list, it can literally be a separate list, or even do it on a piece of paper, or I have one client who does it on a note card, which I think is brilliant, to create the note card, because then today, when I'm actually doing this stuff, I'm only paying attention to my today list. I'm not worried about the 185 things on my to-do list and feeling like I have to get them all done.
Right.
So I think that David Allen would have you working primarily in context, like this is what I'm doing when I'm at my computer. This is what I'm doing when I'm on the telephone. This is what I'm doing when I'm in my car. I mean, these are the errands that I'm running when I'm outside of my office.
Right.
But I think that the today list is an important concept so you can make sure that what you're choosing to do with your time is realistic, and you're not trying to bite off too much.
Right. One thing that works for me, for what it's worth, of this group is I have a master to-do list, but then I have a little list right on my computer screen. It's an app from Google, and I just keep what I'm doing that day. That's where it is, right in front of me. So separate from the mega list.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And keeping it right in front of you is important, too, because
that really helps.
Yeah, because you're going to wrap up one thing and then say, oh, great, time to go play because I'm done. If you have the list right there, you can stay on task.
Lots of people have mentioned other systems that they like. Some person from Zen to Done, Franklin Covey, Microsoft OneNote, Take Back Your Life by Sandy McGee. So people have mentioned other systems that work for them.
Yeah. I want to mention something about Zen to Done. I think Zen to Done is brilliant. It's a take on Getting Things Done from David Allen, but it simplifies it, and it is very, very ADD friendly. It's from Leo. I can't think of how to pronounce his last name, so I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. Balboa or something like that. But if you just Google Zen to Done, you'll find it. It's a simplified GTD.
Huh, that's great. So is there an app as well, or is it a website?
I don't think so. It's a book.
Oh, it's a book. Okay.
It's a book. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's an e-book. I don't know if there's a print version of it or not.
Okay. So changing over a little bit to a different area. Here's a person who says, my boss requires updates on assigned tasks regularly. Are there any suggestions about how I can get these done on time and without seeming to start over again from the beginning each time? This is from Valerie.
Yeah, I would wonder if there's some sort of template that could be used, like a Word document with a grid in it, or a spreadsheet, or some kind of a tool where you've got your list of projects, or task that you're working on, and then there's a column for what the latest is, and maybe a column for the status, so that you don't have to draft a new document from scratch every day, so that you're starting with the same sort of a template.
That sounds
or ask
great
the
idea.
boss what he or she wants.
Right. Here's a question that comes up frequently, and we've actually published articles about why running a household is one of the worst things ever for ADD people. In fact, I remember Sari Solden once saying, if you have to spend every dollar that you earn from your work to pay to run the household, you're still better off than staying home and running the household yourself if you're an ADD mom. But in any event, here's a person who says, I need to learn ways to manage the household tasks, organization, filing, putting things away in the context of multiple stimuli, children, noise, needs, chaos. I just go crazy every day, and I can't even remember where I put things. I mean, I'm just so unorganized. I can't organize under pressure. So Any thoughts for this person?
The key phrase seems to be organizing under pressure, which, yeah, I agree, can't be done. So it seems like taking off some of that pressure and having however you can do it, but getting some quiet time to do the organization thinking kind of work, so that when the mayhem arrives, you're ready for it. Whether that's organizing, coming up with schedules, chore lists for every member of the family, putting things away, developing filing systems, having specific times for things to do, but all of that planning, organizing, executive function type work that is so difficult for an ADD, you need to have some quiet, dedicated time for that.
So you're thinking babysitter or help or something. Yeah,
babysitter, play date, spouse's turn. If there's no spouse,
some way to get
play dates have them on whatever you need to do to get the quiet time that you need for that thinking, planning, organizing kind of stuff.
And I think she's also thinking filing, organization, putting things away. She's sort of saying the whole sort of. I mean, is this a situation where the Fly Lady's 15 minutes a day timer might help someone?
Could be, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Also, alternating different kinds of work. If you try to spend 2 hours filing, you're probably not going to get anything done. If you do 15 minutes of filing, and then 15 minutes of cleaning, and then 15 minutes of something else, kind of going back and forth and using a different part of your brain, it's going to be a whole lot easier. Similarly, alternating similarly, alternating your shoulds and wants. Do something that you have to do, and then something that you want to do, and then something that you have to do, and something that you want to do. Kind of mix it up a little bit will make it easier and more tolerable to plow through the difficult stuff, rather than trying to do all that at once, which is just not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the Fly Lady's idea that you can do anything for 15 minutes, just set a timer and start, is really sort of brilliant. You should sort of get past that. Here's another question that's in the same vein. I'm a newly diagnosed mom and son. We were diagnosed within 2 months of each other. Where do I even begin to get our lives on track? With myself first or with my son? He needs help in school immediately, and I can't really help him if I can't stay on task. Help, where do I start?
That's a good question. I like the put your own life mask on first approach. You've got to get yourself at least some semblance of functioning in order to, A, create the structure that the child needs, B, model the things that you want to do. Now, that said, you can't ignore your child's needs until you are as good as you want to be. I'm wondering about what other resources. I don't know how old this child is, but maybe call in some other resources to help with creating.
The son is 11 years old.
Yeah, okay, so that's a good age. There's going to be resources at school probably. So maybe there are things that can be done in the school to help him. Some of this stuff doesn't have to be time-consuming. Creating consistent schedules is something that doesn't take that much time. Like a homework time, a place to do homework, a quiet, distraction-free place to do homework. Checklists are going to be good for both of you. A lot of this stuff can be done at the same time. I'm a really big fan of checklists for ADD management. What are the things that we do after school? A, B, C, D, E. Mom has a checklist. Son has a checklist. They both have things that they do. Mom's going to need some checklists in order to manage her son. So, for example, like I used to sit down with my son every day after school and go over his stuff with him. And I had to put that on my calendar. I wouldn't remember it. There's no way. So it was kind of both. I don't know if this is at all helpful, this idea of some for you, some for him, some for both of you at the same time. I don't think there is one absolute answer.
It's interesting that you raise this because we have free printables. They're called printables or downloadable fact sheets or whatever for people with ADHD on our website. And the number one most popular repeatedly is sample schedules. So it actually has, 5 things to do before school, brush your teeth, blah, 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 and 5 things to do after school, 5 things to do before bed. It has literal checklists that you can apply to your household. And again, it reminds me of the Fly Lady who has, 5 things you have to do at each time. So you're saying schedules and checklists are a key household management technique for both the adult and the child then.
Yeah, because the child is not going to say, oh, thank you, Mom, for giving me this checklist. Let me get back to you every day and check in with you on my progress. That's not going to happen. The parent has to follow up with the child, even at age 11. The parent has to be the one to say, did you do your checklist today? Or starting out with, remember, do your checklist now, and following up with the child every half hour or so to make sure he's on task. And then that will gradually evolve into, did you remember to do your checklist today, which could evolve into report back when you've done your checklist. It does get better over time, but initially it's pretty labor-intensive for the parent, and so that's why it's important that the parent has to have some sort of support for herself in order to be able to manage this for the child, because the mom's not going to remember to tell the kid to use the checklist if she doesn't have something. Either a checklist or something on her phone or some kind of note on the refrigerator or something that says, hey, remember to ask Johnny about his checklist.
Yeah, a checklist for your checklist.
Exactly. It sounds absurd, but it's what we need.
No.
So I don't think it's absurd.
Any other tips for running a household effectively? I mean, people commonly write in about just being so overwhelmed by running the household that it's just...
I would say let it go. Yeah. I think that choosing to let certain things go and let it be okay, because you said the key word there, which is overwhelmed. We get overwhelmed, we shut down, we don't do any of it. And so I once had a client who felt like she had to vacuum every day and sterilize her sink and scrub the bathtub like every day. And I thought, wow, I'm lucky if I vacuum my floors once a month, And so it's sometimes just letting up with your expectations and deciding what are the things that I really need to have. Like the Fly Lady will say, what is it that she says, the kitchen sink? Have your kitchen sink every day. Pick the thing that's important to you to maintain and have your one area of sanity, and then eventually you can branch out and expand. But don't expect that it's going to be perfect from day one.
Right. Yeah, I think she talks a lot about a different task each day. So the schedule is important and breaking it into small pieces, I think, basically.
Yeah, and routines, too. Routines. If you have the routine where you get up every day, you brush your teeth, you shower, and then you do housework for half an hour, that's your routine. Or you do dishes first thing when you get up, you do A, B, C, D. It's on autopilot, and you don't really think about it anymore. So creating these routines can be a little tricky because it involves deciding what do I want the routine to look like? How am I going to remember what the routine is? So we're kind of back to checklists again is a nice way to develop a routine until you don't need the checklist anymore, and it's just autopilot.
How long do you think it takes to develop a routine?
To develop the routine or the habit?
Yeah, do you think it's the habit or how long?
Well, they say 21 days, so I'm going with 3-4 weeks. That's what I read. It takes 21 days to develop a habit.
And I would say maybe longer for an ADD person. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because you might get a week into it and then you forget about it, and then oops, wait a minute, wasn't I supposed to be doing this? And then you start up again. So that's one thing that I work with a lot of people on, is giving them accountability and support while they're making the routine so that They can remember to do it. But I think that
Right.
if you're doing it consistently every day, if you're remembering to do it and practice it, it's probably 3 weeks is accurate.
Yeah. Here's a person, so the number of questions here on procrastination is the person saying, how can you give me any advice on how to buckle down and finish writing my book by June of this year? So it's very precise, 5 months.
Well, all right. So the issue, there's something to do with procrastination in there. I mean, writing a book by June, there's all kinds of stuff involved in that. There's planning and doing a certain number of pages every day, if that's the method that you're using. But there was a question in there about procrastination.
Right.
And so I usually think of procrastination.
Buckling down sort of, suggests procrastination.
Okay, gotcha. So the issue is, I know I'm supposed to write. I know what I want to write about, but I'm not sitting down to do it.
Right.
So I think procrastination really starts with making the decision that you are actually going to do it. You can say, I should work on my book every day, or a good writer would work on her book every day. But until you say, I am going to work on my book at 2 o'clock every day, it's not going to happen. So making the conscious decision that I will do this thing, knowing when you are going to do this thing, having all of the pieces in place to enable you to do that thing is all going to be very helpful. So write my book is kind of vague. You might want to break it down into smaller pieces. Is there research? Are there interviews? What specific task are you going to do today at 2 o'clock? If that's when you've decided you're going to work on it. Break it down into tiny, tiny pieces. Another one of my favorite strategies for something like that is physically touch the thing that you are avoiding. So if you are working, if you write with pencil and paper, physically put the pencil in your hand and get out the paper. Or if you're doing it on the computer, I realize the pencil's kind of archaic, but if you're doing it on the computer, sit there, just touch the keyboard, open up the document. Do everything, do your setup first, and just think about it in tiny micro steps. Okay, first I'm going to sit in the chair. Okay, I'm in the chair. Now what am I doing? Oh, I'm opening the document. Okay, I'm opening the document. Now what? Oh, read the last paragraph I wrote. Okay, next thing you know, you've ramped up and you're getting into it.
That's great. Those are really great tips. So just sort of just start the little pieces around the actual task sort of get going. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, it reminds me of something Nancy Rady once said about starting an exercise campaign. She said, just drive to the gym and look at it and then drive home again. Similar kind of concept, just take the first step, even if that's all it is. It's just 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. And a lot of times that's all you need to really get into it in earnest. But if you have said, all I'm going to do is drive to the gym and look at it, and that's all you feel like you're able to do, then let yourself get off the hook. Or that's not going to work next time.
Yeah.
But yeah. And
there's another question.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say something about motivation. That's, a lot of times we give into I just don't feel like writing a book. And, you know all about why it's important and why you want to do this. And so sometimes setting up external rewards and consequences for yourself. So if I write my book today, I get to go out to dinner tonight, or I get to have a bubble bath tonight, or I get $10 of spending money. And if I don't work on it today, then I have to. There's some sort of consequence. Like one of my favorite ones is you have to donate a small amount to the opposite political party. Seems to be really popular among my friends.
Yeah, that would be tough in our polarized nation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right. It's highly motivating,
Yeah. There's a similar procrastination question, but it's a little different. This person says, I really struggle with procrastination just in general in my life, and I'm starting a new and challenging job, and I want some skills to start off right so that I don't find myself procrastinating.
Yeah, I think she needs to get clear on what is behind the procrastination. Is it that she's not clear on what to do, or is it just that it's a habit that's I give into it, or is it motivation?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the same rules apply regardless of context. Knowing what's going on with the procrastination, really taking a look at it. Okay, what is this that I'm resisting?
Well, there's another question here that it's not the same, but it is kind of the same. This person says, I teach history at a high school with a very challenging population. It's a challenging, frustrating, stressful, demanding job. and I'm under a lot of pressure to get improved teacher evaluations if I want to keep my job, which I do. I disclosed my diagnosis last week of ADD, social anxiety, and I'm in the process of negotiating accommodations. But her immediate problem, and this just speaks to the question before, is staying focused on making lesson plans and not being distracted or procrastinating. It's a very difficult task, and I feel such stress to perform and to do perfect lesson plans. And when I start to work on them, finally, I just find that I find distractions, I don't accomplish much, I get frustrated. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So she's, under all this pressure at work, and yet, and that in and of itself makes it difficult for her to do the task at hand. So
gotcha. So there's a lot of pressure. It's a very high pressure, high pressure situation, and she's overwhelmed.
Yeah, feeling like
difficult.
And feeling like if she doesn't do this well, she may well lose her job.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds to me like we need to do something with the pressure. Take the pressure off before she'll be able to function at her best. Try to disconnect from the feelings of, if I screw this up, I'm going to get fired. Try not to think about that. I know that's easy for me to say, but just think about, okay, what is the task that I have to do here? Difficult tasks, of course, we're going to procrastinate because you want to do anything but the thing that's really, really hard to do. So I think breaking things down into small pieces, both task-based and time-based. And what I mean by that is that she's doing a lesson plan. Maybe she just does, I actually don't know anything about lesson plans, so I don't know about this example, but maybe just for the first task, identify, okay, what chapters are we covering today, and how do I want to present this? Just break it down into smaller pieces. Also breaking it down time-based. I really like the Pomodoro technique, which is where you work for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, and you repeat that 4 times for a total of a 2-hour work block. Because just like the Fly Lady is saying, we can do anything for 15 minutes. 25 minutes is a nice amount of time as well, where you're just whatever amount of time is manageable for you. If it's 15 minutes, so you're just saying, I'm just going to work on this for 25 minutes and then I'm taking a break, rather than I have to do this until it's done, because that's overwhelming.
Perfectly done, right, yeah.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
And letting go of the perfect part as well, and trusting that in the moment you're a good teacher. When it comes, bottom line is you are a good teacher, you know this stuff. And so maybe you don't have to plan out every last detail. I'm wondering if there was some sort of a rubric or a measurement given to that teacher. This is the expectations. Maybe she needs to clarify the expectations. What exactly do these lesson plans have to include? What's good enough? So maybe starting with that, defining what is good enough, and just limiting it to that. If they're not being submitted to some sort of a lesson plan competition, just, what is it that you want from me, and do just that much.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like it's under a lot of pressure, which is tough for anybody.
Oh, yeah, that whole pressure. So whatever you can do to get the pressure down, relax, put on some nice music, just look at what's at hand and not extrapolate into the bigger, scarier picture.
Yeah, so hard to do. Moving over to literal time management, person says, I am always late. I always run late. I'd just like to be able to turn up on time for an appointment or to catch up with a friend or any other commitment that has a deadline or a time constraint. Help.
So being late is usually because we have underestimated how long it takes to get there. Or we don't have all of our stuff and we think we're ready, but we're not ready. So I find it helpful to don't think about what time you have to be there. Instead, think about what time do you have to walk out the door. What time do you have to leave? So that means you have to subtract out your travel time, the time to get into your car, the time to get out of your car, and have your target be what time you're leaving. We tend to frequently think we're ready, but then we're walking out the door and we realize, oh, I forgot my lunch. Oh, I forgot the report that I had to hand in today. Oh, I forgot, whatever. So well in advance, gathering all these things up could be helpful for being on time. Not having adequate buffers, thinking that it takes 15 minutes to get to work when really that's only if you hit every light is green. If you hit one single red light, it's going to be 20, 25 minutes. So think about worst case, how much does this need to be? And then adding in a buffer time. So giving yourself lots of extra room. Also, being aware of let me just, which means let me just answer this email real quick before I go. Let me just
we have a person here, Jasmine, who says, any tips on the one more thing syndrome?
Yeah,
Even when
exactly.
I'm ready ahead of time, I'm late because just at the moment I get caught up in a task before I go out the door. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's going to kill you every time. And so being aware that you're saying, let me just, or trying to squeeze in one more thing. It's not going to squeeze. You're not going to fit it in. So don't even try to do it.
Someone, I think Michelle Novotny, recommended 2 timers to get out the door on time. Once you set the time that you're going to leave, not the time of the event itself, but a timer for 5 minutes before that time and one for that time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think she even at one time said another one 5 minutes later. This is the last possible moment you can leave. And setting
I think those are good.
Differently. People have told me that they do that too. Set the clocks back so it looks later than it is.
Oh, yeah, I'm not a real big fan of that, but hey, if it works. It's all about finding out what works for you, being aware of exactly where your problem spot is and figuring out what you need to do to solve that problem. So, if it works for you to set your watches ahead, then by all means, but I just, makes me nervous.
Yeah, no, it's true. Another question, I think of these sometimes as almost regulatory issues, like you can't get yourself to start or go out the door, and then the counter to that, which someone here has posted, you find to hear a question about hyper-focus, not being able to stop. When they start doing something, they just can't stop. So out here, it's someone called Raoul, I think. Stopping when it's time. So you've finally gotten started, but you just can't stop. I have small kids, and once they get going, I'm just not able to stop, she says, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we have extra inertia. The Newton's law of physics, a body in motion tends to stay in motion, a body at rest tends to stay at rest. We have extra inertia. It is extra hard for us to get moving. It is extra hard for us to get stopped. And so you always need to account for that. And that's part of going back to the question about how to be on time for stuff, is recognizing it's going to take me a real long time to stop. So I need to stop my last task well before it's time for me to start getting ready, because it's probably going to take me 10 minutes to fully get stopped. It's like a freight train.
Wow.
So, and so I don't know that there's much that we can do about the actual inertia, but we can plan for it, and we can acknowledge, this is the way that I am, and so I need to take workarounds. I need to plan to stop a half an hour before I would really need to, because it's going to take me that long, or I need to start to get moving a half an hour before I need to actually start this thing in order to get ramped up in time. So bottom line is allowing transition times, knowing that it takes a long time to stop and start something new.
So we ADDers have transition issues, is what we're saying, and just to recognize that, I guess. Yeah, interesting.
Exactly.
And here's a person who makes a really good point, something I've really dealt with myself. The motivation for staying on time is my husband's comment to me when I keep him waiting. What makes you think your time is more valuable than mine?
Ouch.
I think that, ouch. I think a lot of ADDers are assumed to be, not taking other people's time, not valuing the people around them, when in fact the cause may be, much more internal than that.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts? Yeah. Thoughts on that?
I think that's an education issue, because sadly, many people who, quote, don't believe in ADD think that we're being willful, that we're being rude, that we're being selfish, and it's so not true. And so I think that if these people could understand what it is that we are going through, what it is that we're experiencing, how hard we really are trying, perhaps they could give us a little empathy and not throw things in our face like, what makes you think your time is more valuable than mine? It just really steams me. Now that said, ADD is never,
wow.
yeah, it's never an excuse, but at the same time, I don't really know too many people with ADD that are willfully being rude like that. It's just not.
Right,
It's
right.
not. It's not the situation at all. And that person really needs to learn about ADD and what challenges we really are facing.
Yeah, yeah. It's tough. It makes you sad, really. There are a number of questions I want to turn to now, if we only have 10 minutes left, about finding help. They vary from just how do you find an ADD coach to how do you work with an ADD coach. So any thoughts you have about that? And then some specific situations, which I can get to after the first questions and answers about getting help, in which people are having a hard time getting help or finding help.
Okay, gotcha. So how to find an ADD coach?
How to find a coach, how to work with one, how you work best with them, what kinds of working relationships someone has that you've seen that are really effective. What's your thoughts on help?
Yeah, so finding a coach, many ADD coaches are members of the ACO, the ADHD Coaches Organization, and also ADA, and both of those have lists of coach finders. And most, if not all, coaches work with people via phone or Skype. Like most of my clients do not come to my office. I work with them over the phone or Skype. So geographic location is really less important. So I think it's not difficult to find a coach. The problem is finding a coach that you feel comfortable with. So you want to find somebody who, maybe they've written things that you can read what they write and see if it resonates with you. Most coaches will offer a free initial consultation. You can call them up and they'll chat with you for half an hour, maybe an hour if you're lucky. And you can ask them whatever question you want, find about their background, find out what kind of people they have been successful working with. Tell them during the consultation there should be some sort of a, tell me about your challenges question, from the coach. The coach should be interested in finding out about what the client wants help with. So definitely take advantage of the consultations. And definitely, you probably want to talk with more than one coach. A lot of it is about rapport. You need to be able to connect with your coach, feel like he or she understands you, understands what is your question, what is your challenge, that you feel comfortable sharing with them, because a coach can't coach you if you don't open up and participate in the process. So it really needs to be a two-way communication, a two-way sharing. So that rapport and comfort level is really important when you're trying to figure out who you want to work with. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I think people still have a hard time knowing sort of what to say. I'll turn to another example here of someone looking for help. It's a bit extreme, but I'm not sure it's, let me see if I can find it here. It's so extreme, really. This is a person who says he's recently been diagnosed. Finally, with ADD at 51 years old, and he thinks, it's really, I say he, I'm not sure if it's a he or she, but it's really the cause of many of his life struggles, including addiction, loss of career, it's again, loss of wife and family, a whole bunch of problems, that he just has a really hard time managing his life, and he says, obviously I need help. And other than self-help, but he's very embarrassed about revealing all what's gone on in his life and in his home, and fills him with absolute terror. So how does he actually turn to find someone to help? I think that's many people's problem. It seems embarrassing.
So how to open up to somebody.
Yeah, how do you start when it seems, such a tremendous number of admissions, personal admissions about your problems?
Well, what's
literally, how do I ask for help?
Okay.
I simply don't know.
So there's two parts of it. There's admitting that you need help and asking for help, and also the fear of revealing too much. And so the client, you wouldn't actually have to reveal everything. You just need to reveal the pertinent stuff until you develop a relationship. So,
well, one thing that you said, I think, for this person specifically, it's helpful that this person, I didn't read all the details of his post, but there are a lot of issues around the state of his house and, the sort of disorganization and his fear of if someone saw it, they would think he was literally a hoarder or mentally ill. But what you're saying is you can work over the phone, so it's not necessarily an issue of having someone.
Yeah, some coaches will come to your house, but they don't have to, and many coaches don't go to your house, so it's up to you to describe the situation. Coaches do tend to be gifted with being non-judgmental, so we truly want to help. We're not here to judge. We don't really think about judging. What I'm listening for as a coach is, what is this person's problem, and how can I lead them to a solution? I'm not at all thinking about how did this person get there, or what caused this person to be like this, or wow, that's really out of the norm. I'm just listening for what are we trying to solve here, and I'm very respectful of the fact that people are coming in looking for help, and that takes a lot of courage and a lot of willingness to change, which can be difficult for people. And I admire somebody who says, I'm not happy with the way things have been, and I want a better life. There's nobody that's going to turn that into a negative. That's nothing but positive.
Right.
Is somebody who wants to make their life better. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, I think, all these things are part of the difficulty people face finding help. Someone here noted, don't expect to find the right coach on the first try, that makes sense, I guess. And other people have talked about the cost. What is the average cost of a coach, and what do you do if you can't afford that cost?
There's a huge range. It depends on the geographic location of the coach. Like New York City coaches tend to charge a lot more than Central Pennsylvania coaches.
Of course. Yes.
So, I've seen coaches start at $300 a month for 4 sessions a month. I've seen coaches charge $1,600 and on up for the same number of sessions.
Wow.
You can reduce the cost of coaching by meeting less frequently, perhaps. Like, for example, I have different coaching packages that if budget is an issue, you can meet with me fewer times, and it costs a lot less. You still get the same between session support, but it costs less because we're meeting less. And most coaches do that. They have a variety of options, so you could pick a coaching option that's where you're meeting less frequently. Some states, through their Office of Vocational Rehabilitation or whatever the similar is, like in Pennsylvania it's OVR, and I think New Mexico it's the Department for Vocational Rehabilitation, but there's a state agency in some states that takes people with disabilities, matches them up with services, and funds those services. I know of at least 2 states, because I'm a participating vendor, where the coaching is paid for by the state. So a client would go to the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation and say, I have ADHD, what can you do for me? And they might recommend coaching, and so that's one way you could get it paid for, is to work through the state. Now that I've said this, they're probably going to shut down the whole program, but I know that people are getting coaching paid for that way.
Well, here's a person who posted a helpful comment that she found a clinical trial online at her local children's hospital and received 12 weeks of free coaching for her son from their psychologist. And she also got lots of parental suggestions, tip sheets, and it was extremely valuable. So, yes, there are some programs that are available through children's hospitals or other hospitals for coaching. And someone else points out that something called onedegreeforward.com. It's an affordable 16-week program to help declutter, redesign your space, and organize. That's the suggestion. So people are making suggestions, and guys, we will post some of these suggestions on the page for Beth's webinar ultimately, because there's a lot of helpful tips. People are also asking, is ADHD coaching eligible for health insurance reimbursement? Do you know? I would think that would be unlikely, right?
Health insurance is not going to pay for it. I have heard of people running it through an HSA, a health savings account. I don't know how kosher that is, so I would want to consult. I want you to consult with a tax attorney, or at least read the IRS publication and make your own decision. I'm not saying that this is an allowed deduction, but I know that people have run it through their HSAs. Also, flexible spending plans, otherwise known as Section 125 plans that some employers offer, will let you pay for it with pre-tax dollars.
Okay. So, Beth, we're almost out of time, and I'm going to give you the last question for your final words of wisdom from James, who says, what's Beth's best way to implement this great information? Can she give us a sample plan to how she would implement this so it really sticks? I think this would be to-do system, strategy, prioritization, time management specifically.
Yeah, I would say pick one thing and try not to do it all. If you say, I'm going to do everything that she talked about today, and I'm going to do it all right away, it's trying to make too many changes at once.
So pick one item to change.
Yeah, pick one thing that really resonates with you and work on just that until you've got it down, and then move on to something else.
Beth, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you.
Yeah, we'll probably be back to you for session 2. We have so many more questions that we just couldn't get to, and
I'd be happy
the areas that you're touching on are really important to our readers. So thanks again. Goodbye, everybody.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.